and thank you for joining our Teaching for 21st Century webinar brought to you by the David Horowitz Freedom Center and the Glazov Gang. I'm your host, Annie Cyrus. Please use the Q&A box on your screen if you have any questions, and I promise we will answer them as soon as our very special guest presentation is over. With that being said, it is my privilege to introduce our speaker this evening, Charles Negy. He is the author of the book White Shaming. He was also associate professor of psychology at the University of Central Florida before he was terminated due to cancel culture. Hi, Charles. Thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure to be with you.
Why don't we start from there? What happened? What got you fired?
All right, so some of your viewers probably already know the story, the backstory, so I'll spend just a few minutes reminding them of what began, how all this began, excuse me. So back in June, I tweeted some controversial comments on Twitter, and some people interpreted those as racist. I don't consider them racist at all. They're somewhat provocative, and we can debate those comments, but nonetheless, that night, I was descended upon by hundreds of people on Twitter. It appeared that they were affiliated with Black Lives Matter and telling me that I'm going to get fired. The very next day, the University of Central Florida president and provost are outside protesting and meeting with a relatively small group, I don't know, maybe 20 to 50 students on campus, demanding that I be fired. And the provost and the president are more or less trying to placate those students and telling them it's going to take time. And they encourage the students to lodge discrimination complaints against me. And even on that day, June 4th, the president posted on the UCF webpage an announcement that denounced my racist and vile comments on Twitter. And after he spent a few minutes denouncing me and my comments, he ended that posting by saying that if anyone has ever felt like they've been racially discriminated against or harassed by any professor, to contact their integrity line, and they could even report a person anonymously. And of course, University of Central Florida has close to 70,000 students. I personally, over the last 22 years, have taught over 30,000 students. So they started receiving hundreds of complaints, and the university right away launched an investigation into my entire 22-year career at UCF. And despite the fact that I've gotten 3 major teaching awards and have received outstanding in teaching for 17 of 22 years at the end of the year, they concluded that I've been racially harassing students all this time, and they just never knew about it. And that, along with, they read in the book White Shaming a 2 or 3 sentence story about me potentially bribing a healthcare worker in Peru 10 years ago. That, along with proclaiming that I failed to report a case where a female student said my teacher assistant had touched her, and that was 6 years ago. So all combined, they decided on January 13th that they were going to fire me within 7 business days. And it actually took them about 10 business days. But nonetheless, I've been a tenured professor all this time, tenured for about 18 years, and yet they fired me. And they declared that because I represent a threat to the safety of the students on campus, that they were justified in denying giving me the customary 6 months notice and 6 months pay before they fired me. So their firing of me was immediate, and I became unemployed without a paycheck immediately. which, as you might imagine, turned my world upside down. I had to quickly put my house on the market and sell it and go rent a room from someone's house. And so what I'm doing currently is I had a private attorney. I have a private attorney. Her name is Samantha Harris. And even though she's affiliated with FIRE, the Foundations for Individual Rights in Education, which fights for free speech on campus, she also works as a private attorney. And so she was representing me. And we were wanting to file a lawsuit against University of Central Florida for multiple things. The primary thing being retaliating against my constitutionally protected speech. But then we found out that since we have a union, we faculty have a union in the state of Florida, that I could either grieve, which is challenge the firing through the assistance with a union attorney, or I can file a lawsuit with my private attorney, but I can't do both simultaneously. So we decided the first thing is first, take advantage of the fact that I have a union and they have provided me with an attorney. And he's in the process of challenging UCF for terminating me. The goal is to get my job reinstated. And we won't know the outcome of that for about a year. Why a year? Well, there are several stages in the grieving process, and he's already gone through the first stage, and University of Central Florida made it clear they're not budging. They're determined to stay firm, that they are justified in firing me. So we have a meeting next week, we being my union appointed attorney and UCF, University of Central Florida officials, and myself. But my attorney, I just met with him yesterday for the first time, face-to-face via Zoom. And he told me it's going to be a waste of time, but we have to do that. We have to have that meeting. It's going to be a waste of time because UCF has already made it clear that they're going to dig in their heels and stay firm, and they're having fired me. So he let me know that this case is going to go all the way to arbitration. An independent arbitrator will have to hear this case and make a decision whether or not UCF was justified in firing me or not. And it's part of our collective bargaining agreement, that whatever the arbitrator decides, it's binding legally. So if the arbitrator hears my case and concludes UCF was not justified in firing me, UCF is going to have to give me back my job. Now, what will happen at that point, we don't know. But all I can say for now is, having met with my attorney for the first time yesterday and to hear his interpretation of my case, I am cautiously optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic that I will get my job reinstated, but it's going to take approximately a year. And in that meantime, I'm unemployed without any income. So that's the latest on my case. Now, I want to share with your viewers that there's an organization called Speech First. Speech First. Speech First tends to be a conservative organization politically. I think that's the case. Nonetheless, they are going around the country filing lawsuits against universities for creating policies that apply to students and faculty that infringe upon our constitutional right to free speech. So they being Speech First, I don't think they won the lawsuit as much as the defendants, which was University of Texas at Austin and University of Michigan, both caved in and changed their policies because they had policies that allowed students to tattletale or snitch on other students or other professors who simply offended them racially. And of course, that's a subjective determination. So Speech First, I'll say they won that case, even though I don't think it went to trial. But nonetheless, in February last month, Speech First filed a lawsuit against the University of Central Florida. And in that lawsuit, they mentioned me 9 times. And the reason they mentioned me is because students that they were interviewing were telling Speech First people that they're afraid to express themselves on campus because they have seen what University of Central Florida did to a tenured professor, all because they didn't like his tweets. And so I've read the lawsuit. It's called a complaint before, at this point in time, it's called a complaint. In the complaint, they point out UCF's policies that they adopted this past October, that anyone who engages in a verbal act that offends a student, that's unacceptable. And the student is encouraged to use, they have a bias response team that they call the Just Knights response team. So if you just subjectively feel offended racially or because of your gender or your gender identity, you are encouraged to contact the UCF integrity line, even anonymously, to report the person who did this to you. Could be a student, could be a professor, it doesn't matter. And the university is going to launch an investigation into that person who the complaint was made against. So Speech First had just filed a lawsuit that will challenge UCF's policies that are really stifling and putting a chill to our ability to say what we think is important on campus. Remember, this is not a social gathering. This is not a church. It's not a political organization. It's a university, a public university. The whole purpose of a university is to pursue truth the best that you can, to exchange in a vigorous debates with others to try to get at some conclusion. And we should not have any administrators wanting to kowtow or placate special interest groups by protecting them from hearing things that they don't want to hear. So in a nutshell, that's where my case is. And I'm really happy that Speech First has recently filed a lawsuit against UCF because it's bringing public attention to the fact that University of Central Florida, along with other universities, are really subverting their purpose of a university. Again, we should have the most, if there's any place in the United States that should have the maximum freedom to express one's beliefs or views or opinions, it should be a university. And yet we're losing that. We're losing that in the United States. So if I could say one more thing before maybe we get to questions or comments from anyone. There's a lawsuit, another lawsuit that has been filed in Las Vegas. So here's the case behind that lawsuit. A woman who is African-American was married to a man who is white. The man passed away and they had a child. The child obviously is biracial, but the child physically looks white. And he's attending a mostly African-American public school. And the school has compelled the students to take a civics course, it's either a sociology or a civics course, that's based on diversity, equity, and inclusion and critical race theory. And they're being taught that if you're white or a male or heterosexual or even a Christian, you're an oppressor and you're racist. And if you deny your racism, if you claim you're not a racist, you're just in denial. You're just in denial. So her son, who's physically looks white, even though he's really biracial, attending mostly a black school, is attending by force such a class, and he came home quite distraught. And his mother filed a lawsuit against the school. And I want to point out something here. Based on what I've read, because I'm reading this from news stories, I'm not part of this lawsuit, of course. An Obama-appointed judge looked at this complaint and thought there was merit to it and he's allowing it to go forward into a lawsuit. So this is the first of its kind in the United States, to the best of my knowledge, where people are being compelled to participate with the diversity, equity, inclusion training, in this case, in a public school. And they're being told things like an entire class of people, whites, males, heterosexuals, Christians, are evil. And that's illegal. That violates the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Not to mention it's unethical and not accurate. So a lot of people are watching this case to see how it unfolds, because if that mother were to prevail in that case, it could be the first domino that falls in a series of dominoes, because as your your viewers probably know, corporations, universities, K through 12 schools are implementing some version of a diversity, equity, inclusion training or education that's loosely based on critical race theory all across the country. So I want to be cautiously optimistic about enough pushback is taking place here and there across the country, and I'm doing my part. Not to sound like I'm a martyr, I'm not, but I could have resigned and just left the state in humiliation, or taken off to Latin America, where I hope to retire one day. But I'm going to fight University of Central Florida until the bitter end, because I refuse to allow a white privileged liberal president who wants to shove his ideology on the rest of us to get away with what he's done to me, and trying to tell me what I can or cannot say in my classes. And we'll see what happens. I may lose, but I may be victorious.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing all that information. Secondly, good for you. I'm glad you're fighting. Yes, that's okay. It's sad that our country is at a point where there is a need for lawsuits, but we are where we are. And I'm glad there are people like you or the mother of that student who are pushing back, because we can't just sit back. And as you said, we can't just resign and go hide somewhere. That's how we're going to lose our country. So thank you for fighting. And I'm sure myself and everybody watching this, we are definitely behind you. And hopefully you will win this case. But I have a question for you. So going back to your story, this all started with a tweet, right? You put out a tweet. That's what triggered the whole event, correct?
There were 2 or 3 tweets, but 2 in particular seemed to really upset people.
But may I ask you, what were those tweets?
Of course. One was a sincere question, and I even wrote, sincere question, : if African Americans, on average, parentheses, as a group, had the same behavioral profile as, on average, Asian Americans, and then I put in parentheses, being the most educated, on average, earning the most money, committing the least crimes, into parentheses, would we still be proclaiming that systemic racism is real? So I posed a rhetorical question. If African Americans as a group had the same behavioral profile as Asian Americans, will we still be constantly running around proclaiming that systemic racism is real? That really upset people. Why? I'm guessing because I'm supposed to never question the claim that systemic racism is real. I'm supposed to just be on board with that. And if I ever question it, which I did, well, that makes me a bona fide racist. And then the other tweet that seems to have really caused people problems is, I was replying to someone else who said, in the United States, African Americans are sacred cows. So I was replying to that. And I said, there is such a thing, this is coming from me now, there is such a thing as Black privilege. So I mentioned that affirmative action, contract set-asides, special scholarships are representative of a privilege. And I ended that little comment by saying African Americans as a group would benefit from, I'm paraphrasing myself here, accurate feedback. And that was it. And then what I meant by that was, my position is there's no one holding an individual African American person down today in 2021 or 2020 when I made the tweet. That if there's anything holding an African American back or down, it's her or himself. They're the ones, those individuals, if they're not being relatively successful in the United States, they're the ones who chose to quit school. No one made them quit school. They're the ones who, while they were in school, chose to blow it off and not take their studies seriously. For those of us who are from lower income backgrounds, as myself, education is the greatest thing that we have to latch onto that allows us to advance socially in society. And by quitting school or not taking your studies seriously, you're bypassing, you're letting go, you're forfeiting a grand opportunity to change your lot in life. So my point is, Black Americans have agency. They have a free will. They can choose not to commit crime. I'm not saying the majority of African Americans commit crime. I'm not saying the majority of African Americans are living in low income neighborhoods. They don't. But the ones who do, they need to accept some responsibility. That was the intent behind that tweet. The president of the university could have contacted me and said, can you explain your tweets before I go out in public and take on the mob? No, he's out there joining hands with the mob, aligning himself with them, plotting how is he going to satisfy the mob and get me fired.
That was actually my next question. Did they even give you a chance to either explain or defend yourself, or did all this happen in a, they just went into a private room and decided it's time for you to be terminated?
They never contacted me. No one. They started the investigation on June 4th, and I didn't even know I was being investigated until 6 weeks later. I didn't even know that they had already collected hundreds of emails and recordings of my lectures from students and complaints until 6 weeks later. They let me know I've been under investigation. And they never checked in with me to hear my point of view or anything.
Wow. So basically what happened to not guilty until proven guilty?
Well, we're living in the twilight zone.
We definitely are. Let me read you a question from our audience, which actually it was kind of in my mind too. I thought tenure prevented teachers from getting fired. Do you have any idea why that failed in your case?
Well, let me tell you, I had that idea too. That's the purpose of tenure. Now, obviously, tenure does not permit us to do things that are illegal or I can't come in class and start hurling racial slurs at students or anything. That's not protected speech. But just saying things that are controversial, that are provocative, that are even uncomfortable or offensive for some students to hear, tenure is supposed to protect us. That's why I will tell your viewers, there's a lot of professors across the country following my case because they're in shock that the university didn't just censure me or publicly condemn me, but they went out of their way. By the way, some of your viewers may know this, but University of Central Florida produced a 244-page investigative report on me. So it's 244 pages of investigation of me. That's how badly they were looking for something to justify firing me.
I hate to say this, but they really wanted you fired. I'm so sorry this is happening, but at the same time, I don't think I'm shocked or surprised. I mean, I think I personally have seen this coming from a long time ago. The whole PC culture and, cancel culture, and my feelings are more important than your facts. And that's the thing. What you tweeted seemed genuinely like a fact. At least the second tweet you said. I can tell you, I'm an immigrant. I came to this country after I was 18. I'm 37 now. And I actually don't have education. As an immigrant, it was impossible for me to afford going to university and getting education. But I took my time elsewhere to self-teach or learn things that I could to get where I am today. I'm in no shape or form a wealthy woman, but I don't need to go rob a store to feed myself. You know what I mean? So I
Mhm.
completely agree with your statement.
Mhm.
It's a choice. A lot of immigrants come to this country and turn out to be like me. A lot come here and keep on, taking welfare and robbing the government. These are all personal choices. It has nothing to do with race. So again, I personally, I think the second tweet you read was fact. And the first one was genuinely, I mean, I think that's part of your job, isn't it? As a professor, your job is to pose questions and trigger your students to think outside of the box.
I
Isn't
know.
that what it is?
Yeah, you would think so. You would think so. By the way, just for the record here, there's an African American writer. His name is Coleman Hughes. Coleman Hughes. He recently wrote an article on the internet about Black privilege. So I'm not the only one who thinks that some of the benefits that we bestow upon African Americans represent some form of a privilege. By the way, I'm bi-ethnic, I'm part white, part Hispanic. I've gotten national Hispanic scholarships when I was a graduate student. That's a privilege that's just for me. Other people who are not Hispanic can't pursue those scholarships. So, I'm calling it as it is. I'm not sure why people got so upset over that, but as you know, we're upset over Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss. So if we're upset over that, I say we, the people who are crazy left, liberal, progressive people, then of course they're going to be upset over things that I say.
Of course. And let's not mention my favorite part, Mr. Potato Head. Woo! Very offensive. Okay. Here's another question from our audience. Do you administ- do administrators in general really believe that canceling people they disagree with, or are they themselves under some kind of threats? If so, where does this threat come from?
Okay, so I can't speak for all the administrators across the country. There's too many universities. So my best speculation is there may be some administrators who don't buy into all of this, but they know their base, their undergraduate students who pay their tuition, which pay presidents and provosts outrageous salaries. The president of University of Central Florida earns $1 million a year. That's his salary, $1 million a year, and he can earn up to $500,000 each year in bonuses. Okay, so he has a vested interest in wanting to protect that cushy life he has, and so he wants to satisfy the masses, the undergraduates. And in the case of the president of University of Central Florida, I think he's a believer. He really believes this diversity, equity, inclusion, even though he's the most privileged white man on the planet. He won't resign and give his position over to a Black person. He'll fight to the end to keep his position while he expects everyone else to bow down at the diversity altar and show deference to two ethnic groups above any respect that's afforded to two other ethnic groups. So I think their administrators vary. Some are just playing along with the game because they want to satisfy their base. And then there are administrators who really and truly are advocates for what they call diversity, equity, and inclusion. Keep in mind, let me just say quickly for your viewers, I think there's something to be said for diversity. We do have an opportunity to learn from having contact with people from different walks of life. The problem with the current diversity, equity, inclusion, in my mind, is that it's racist. It's expecting us to, like I said, show deference to African Americans and secondarily to Hispanics, while discriminating against whites and Asian Americans. That's so un-American, that's so illegal, that's so unethical, and yet people across the country think it's okay. And so they try to rationalize it by saying there's observed social inequalities. Well, they're just assuming those inequalities are due to malfeasance, racial malfeasance, someone holding them back, them being African Americans or Hispanic. That's like saying the NBA tryouts must be racist against every group except Black people. Why? Well, because look at the outcome. Most of the players are Black. So that's evidence right there. There's racial malfeasance going on in the tryouts. We need to have diversity and equity in the NBA games. No one says that. So one more thing I want to tell your viewers, all these administrators who are shoving diversity, equity, inclusion down the rest of our throats, they won't apply it to their athletic department. They won't apply that to their athletic programs. They're fine with not having any diversity on their sports teams or equity. But then over here, outside of athletics, they think if 13% of the population is Black, we need to have 13% of our faculty being Black. And we need to do something, we need to socially arrange that to make it happen. But they don't apply that to their athletic programs.
Oh, of course not. Sadly, very much hypocrisy.
That's right. Okay. They're hypocrites. They're hypocrites.
They are ridiculously. And again, I'm completely brown, so even though I will be labeled racist for saying this, but I'll say it. Here's the thing. If you live in America, either you were born here or you got your way, somehow you made it to America, whatever happens to your future is your choice. We have had a Black president in America. Don't tell me there is any kind of racism. I'm just saying. But here's another question from our audience. Professor, with the Democrats taking control of all branches of government and also controlling all aspects of our culture, do you think it's possible to defeat this insane cancel culture and the demonization of those that have viewpoints that are contrary to the liberal orthodoxy?
Okay, so first disclaimer is I try to avoid politics. Let's keep that in mind. So let me just make some speculations about in reference or in response to the person's inquiry. I think the country, the United States, needs to have at least 2 viable political parties. Why? Because if we become a one-party nation, we're losing out on the check that the other party would have served to keep the party in power from drifting further and further towards the extremes. So knowing there's another party that could usurp your power in an election, that tends to serve as a check against one party becoming too extreme in their positions. So if we were to become, and we may, and I'm scared about it, we may become a one-party nation from this point onward, perhaps, especially if the current Democratic administration may legalize all the undocumented immigrants, banking on the hope that they will be voting Democratic in the future. That's very problematic because, like I said, if we just have one party, in the case of Democrats, they're going to just continue drifting further and further to the left, pushing socialism on us, pushing all of their woke values and policies on us, which are really racist policies. Again, these are racist policies against whites and against Asians. So I do have a concern about where the country is headed politically, but I'm not a political scientist, and I try hard to not get into politics in my discussions.
Okay, that is very understandable. So here's a question for you. Are you still on Twitter, or did they remove you or make you delete those 2 tweets?
Okay, when they say they, if they're referring to University of Central Florida, I refuse to bow down to University of Central Florida. So for the 6 months that they were investigating me, and while I was still employed and teaching, I was highly active on Twitter, just to show them that they're not going to silence my speech. And even after I got fired, I'm still actively on Twitter. You're welcome to follow me if you'd like.
And what would be the handle we can find you on?
It's Charles Negy, my name.
Perfect, your name. Okay. I don't tweet, but I hope anyone who's out there on Twitter land would go follow you. Here's another question. From your perspective on the inside of a university, does the most politically correct pressure come from the students, from fellow teachers, from administration, or from outside complainers?
Well, I can only speak about University of Central Florida, and it's coming from all angles. It's coming from the students. They, in the last 2 or 3 years, they come into class. I don't want to stereotype all of them. Some to many come into class anti-capitalism, anti-white people. And then there are professors, not all professors, but they tend to be in the humanities and the social sciences. Again, not all of them, but the culture is there in the humanities and the social sciences that we all have to be liberal, left-wing, woke on the diversity train. And then the whole administration is obsessed. They are fixated on race and diversity.
Okay, now let's reverse the question. Are you getting any support from either students or fellow professors or anyone at UCF?
UCF. My entire psychology department, which has over 40 faculty, have disowned me. They do not speak with me. There's one person in that department who has quietly reached out to me through text and does not want his or her name to be revealed, but just one person. And then there's 2 people. I think we have over 1,000 faculty total. There's 2 people from other departments who I never knew before who have reached out to me and are supportive of me. So I can only surmise that some of the professors are in agreement with what happened to me. Some of the professors are afraid to death if they come forward and support me, that the university will turn against them and try to find a way to fire them. And then I bet some individuals don't know anything about my real case, but they just assume if there was a 244-page report and he got fired, he must have done some really bad things, some really racist things. So I'm sure that's what happened. And they're not concerned enough to delve into my case to realize the whole investigation was a bogus and fraudulent investigation with a predetermined outcome to find a way to fire me, all because they don't like my views. Just let your viewers know, the president, we just hired him like 1.5 to 2 years ago. He came in from day one saying his primary mission is to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, not raise academic standards anywhere, but to promote diversity, equity, inclusion. And I had written him an email welcoming him to the university, but telling him how there's some problems with diversity, equity, inclusion that is he willing to have a discussion about. He never got back to me. So I think this is very personal for him. I think he knows I'm willing to challenge his ideology. And he, like most of these people, just like Ibram Kendi, if your viewers know who that character is, the guy who wrote how to be an anti-racist or something like that. He doesn't want to have a challenge. He doesn't want to have a debate because he's afraid it would be exposed how hollow their attitudes are and they're not substantiated well. So the president never has wanted to engage with me or anything. He just wants to get rid of me so he can go forward with his mission.
Well, again, if it's any consolation, the Constitution of the United States of America is on your side. So we're all here cheering for you. For those of us in our audience who want to follow you, who want to get updates on your case, who may want to support you in this situation, where can they go to get behind you?
Okay. I am ashamed to say this, but I am raising funds to help support me both survive and with my prospective lawsuit. So I have a GoFundMe deleted my account. They eliminated it within 24 hours and they refunded all the donations back to the donors. because someone let them know what my case is about. So I have a PayPal. So you can find Charles Negy PayPal if you're willing to donate something. But then you can follow me on Twitter. My name is Charles Negy. That's my Twitter account. And then if you want to contact me, my email is charlesnegy@gmail.com. And so I'm happy to interact with people and support other people's cases that are similar to mine. So feel free, I'm talking to your viewers, feel free to reach out to me in whatever way you'd like.
Yes, I agree. Please do reach out to him and support him in any way you can. Charles, thank you so much again for giving us your time and sharing your story. And again, all of our hearts and prayers are coming your way.
Thank you for having me on your program, and best wishes to all of you.
Absolutely. And those of our audience who stayed with us until now, thank you so much. We do appreciate you. And remember, these webinars are brought to you by the David Horowitz Freedom Center and the Glazov Gang for free. So if you'd like to support these webinars, all you got to do is go to frontpagemag.com and consider making a 100% tax deductible donation. With that being said, stay safe and goodbye.